Just took it live.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. Welcome to the GitLab 12.7 kickoff review. My name is Scott Williamson. I'm the VP of Product for GitLab and happy to be your MC today. As usual, we'll present from this direction/kickoff page at about.gitlab.com. So if you want to follow along with the page that we're on, you can go there. As you scroll down a bit, Eric, you'll see we organize this by section and then stage. So dev is a section. We have various stages underneath: manage, plan, create, for example. Each section has videos you can see for a deeper dive on the various groups that we have. You can also dig into specific issues and provide feedback. So we would love your interaction and feedback on the things that we have planned for this release. We're going to present in 5 different sections. So Eric Brinkman will present on dev. Jason Lenny will present on CICD. Kenny Johnston will present on ops. David DeSanto will present on secure and defend. And Josh Lambert will present on enablement. And they'll be presenting high-level themes. We can't cover all the details in here. So if there are specific issues or aspects you're curious about, again, please weigh in the issues. Also a reminder, we do plan ambitiously, so please do not view this as a commitment, but rather a target. We will do everything we can to deliver as much of this as possible, but we do expect changes as we learn more and get through the next month. So with that, I will turn it over to Eric to cover the dev section.
Thanks so much, Scott. So my name is Eric Brinkman. I'm the product director for the dev section. And as a quick reminder, the dev section is the first 3 stages of the DevOps lifecycle. And that's the manage stage, the plan stage, and the create stage. And so today I'll be touching on a few really neat things that we'll be planning for GitLab 12.7 in all 3 of those stages. So let's go ahead and get started with the manage stage. And in the manage stage, there's a lot of great functionality coming for group managed accounts, admin controls, audit logging, and analytics. Let's start with group managed accounts. In group managed accounts, we'll be releasing functionality that will allow group owners to disable project forking outside of the group managed account. This means that those private projects in the organization will remain in the organization and can't be forked to a personal namespace. We'll also be working on a feature to prevent those projects from being shared outside of a group managed account group. Today, this can only be initiated by the group's owner, but it does have the potential to invalidate single sign-on enforcement, which is something we would want to prevent for a group managed account. For admin controls and audit logging, we'll be adding the ability for GitLab admins to disable self-approvals for merge requests, which will help prevent users from bypassing security or compliance policies in their organizations. And from an audit perspective, as many users can attest, audit logs, while very useful in the UI, are not as easy to use as they should be because they don't contain sorting or filtering. In 12.7, we're planning for the ability to both filter and sort the audit log table in the UI, which will make that experience much better. And lastly, in manage, we are working on a new analytics feature that should help users get much more visibility into their code review process. So this mock-up shows what we're thinking, and it'll help teams better understand which merge requests get hung up in code reviews. So take a look, let us know what you think, and contribute in the issue. Moving on to the plan stage. In the plan stage, we continue to schedule huge improvements in all 3 of our groups. So that's the project management group, the portfolio management group, and the certified group. In the project and portfolio management groups, we'll be focusing on adding burn-up charts to the milestone page. Burn-up charts are really useful because they help you understand if scope has been added during a milestone and just help you manage your sprints better overall. We're also planning on continuing milestone improvements, as we've talked about previously, such as the ability to include multiple milestones to an issue or merge request and define the types of these milestones. And while we're on the topic of milestones still, we're planning on adding milestones into the roadmap view. We have a few mockups in the issue description, so go ahead and poke around and take a look. But you can see what we're thinking directionally here with a milestone row at the top and then milestones as dotted lines, so you can easily see how your epics are going to line up with respect to your milestones. And lastly, for plan, in our certified group, we'll be continuing to make progress on our minimum viable change for requirements management. But I wanted to highlight one really neat improvement to the service desk that is something a lot of customers have been asking us for. When you use a service desk today, you get a pretty long email that is automatically defined for the email that you're supposed to use to send service desk interactions to. And we've had a lot of customers come to us and say, I'd love the ability to customize this email. And so I'm excited to announce that in GitLab 12.7, we're planning on allowing for customizable email addresses to interact with the service desk, which will make that experience a lot more delightful and more useful. So let us know what you think in this issue and if this is something that you're excited about. And moving on to the create stage, the last of the dev stages. In the create stage for source code and Gitly, we have a ton of really great stuff coming out. For source code, one of the things that we're going to be adding is a minimal merge ref based diff. So by default today in GitLab, the diff shown in the merge request is the delta between the source branch and the target branch at the time of the source branch was created. When a merge request takes a while to merge and stays open for several weeks, oftentimes the target branch, such as master, can have a ton of changes. And when this happens, a common developer workflow is to merge the target branch into your source branch before merging the source branch back into the target branch. In these situations, the diffs in GitLab today can look a little weird and can be confusing. And so we're adding an optional diff view to base the diff on the source branch and the merge ref to help streamline the code review process in these situations. Additionally, we'll be adding a feature to scope merge request approval rules only to protected branches. Another common developer workflow is merging feature branch into feature branch or merging the target branch, such as master, back into your feature branch, as we just mentioned. And these don't really require approvals or shouldn't require approvals all the time. And so approvals can sometimes slow developers down. We don't want that to happen. We want developers to be as efficient as possible inside of GitLab. And so we'll be adding the ability to only scope merge request approval rules to protected branches. And last but not least, in the create stage, I'm very excited to announce the work for our editor team who owns our web IDE. We've heard feedback that people love using the GitLab web IDE, but it can be a bit blinding because it uses a white background. In 12.7, the editor team is going to spike into what it will take to have the web IDE support your syntax highlighting preference that exists inside of GitLab, which will allow you to create an experience that works for you, whether you want a white background or something a little bit darker to emulate that dark mode experience that we all know and love. And lastly, for the web IDE, we've also heard some feedback that it's hard to make a merge request in the web IDE and remain in a contextual experience that makes sense, where you might want to make a second commit very easily. So in 12.7, we'll be spiking into some research that'll help us provide the right experience for creating a merge request right from the web IDE. There's so many more great things coming to the dev section today. In 12.7, please take a look at the kickoff page, look at the videos, look at all the issues I couldn't get into because of time, and let us know what you think. Thanks so much. Have a great holiday, and we hope you stay safe and have a great time with your family. Thanks. Back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Eric. Love the festive attire. Let's pass it over to Jason for CICD overview.
Thanks for that, Scott. So a few things that I want to cover in CICD today. In the verify team, which covers the build and test cycle, I want to first talk about the host alias option that we're adding for Kubernetes. So that is, apologies, not showing up here at the moment, but I'll correct that later. What we're adding though is the ability to, in Kubernetes 1.7, use host aliases instead of etc hosts for doing the configuration for how your pods will talk to each other. That was causing an issue in the latest version of Kubernetes recently for some of our users. And so we're excited to be able to deliver that fix. The other thing that I just want to touch on briefly, which is not here, but is more of an ongoing work, is that we are continuing our work on the shared runners for Windows beta that we're going to be rolling out in January. So if you're interested in participating in that program, if you're excited to use Windows runners with GitLab in the shared fleet, we would love to hear from you. It would be great to have your participation in that. On the package side, the most important item that we're delivering is the new NuGet or .NET repository. So NuGet is a very popular package manager for .NET or Windows users. And so it's going to be great to add that and help improve our overall Windows developer experience. This one is close to my heart because I cut my teeth on doing Windows development and using C# and .NET back in the day. So helping people who are kind of like me and I used to be is always one of the great things about being a product manager. So that's always nice to do, and it'll be great to deliver this feature. On the release side, we're focusing heavily on our do powerful things theme, where we're trying to make it possible to do things quickly, do powerful things without having to do a ton of research and set up complicated things that have all of those work in a nice way just when you're using GitLab. And the first feature that I want to touch on here is that we're adding release actions and into the audit log in GitLab. So if you create a release, if you edit a release, if you do anything with a release, including downloading the content of it, that will be tracked in the audit log. So you can now work with your compliance teams to make sure that anything that's happening with your releases is being tracked just like it should in any good release process. The other feature, which is probably the one that I'm most excited for overall in the entire release, is this one, the ability to add a feature flag to an issue. So tying these things together is going to be a powerful way to add context both to feature flags and to issues. What you're going to be able to do is when you're editing a feature flag, you can connect it to related issues that may have introduced it or may have modified it or in some way provide context to what that feature flag does. From the issues side, then you'll see the related feature flags that are associated with that issue. This is kind of a pattern that we're taking with a lot of the features that are going to be coming out with in the release area related to the releases feature and feature flags. And really taking advantage of the GitLab single application to tie these things together, provide the context in the merge request, provide the context in the issue, and really make it possible, unlike what any other application out there can do, to give you all the information that you need when you're delivering software at the time you need it. So that's a really, really great one. And it's something that we're going to be able to expand on in the future and deliver a lot more features like it. And then finally, another nice improvement for when you're setting up your projects and trying to get things up and running quickly is group deploy tokens, which is this one here. At the moment, deploy tokens can be set up on a per project basis, but not at the group level. This is a very popular issue with 160 upvotes. And so it's going to be really, really nice to get this out there and help simplify CI configurations and CD configurations and just make it easy to get up and running, to deploy your group together. And since groups typically might represent a collection of related microservices or different parts of a multi-tiered, more traditional application, like monolith type application, this will just make that much, much easier. So another really nice improvement that I hope is going to make everybody's day a little bit better in the next year. So that's it for CICD in this release. And so I will turn things over to Kenny for ops. Or sorry, back to you actually, Scott.
Yeah, thanks. That feature flag issue does look amazing. So at this point, let's hand it back to Kenny, our second Santa.
Second Santa, I love it. Yeah, Jason, that feature flag one is an awesome example of kind of the power of a single application and having the kind of context around various parts of your software development process all right in one UI. So super cool. I love that one. Yeah, my name is Kenny Johnston. I am going to be covering the ops section that includes the configure and monitor stages. I'll start in configure. So our first one is a really cool MVC that I'm excited about that is about adding chaos engineering to your Kubernetes cluster. So today you can attach a Kubernetes cluster to GitLab, and there's a kind of burgeoning movement to enable you to test various failure scenarios to ensure that your application remains resilient throughout those failure scenarios that Kubernetes in general and great microservices application architecture practices help you avoid. We're going to be starting our MVC in that process by adding a open source tool called Litmus Chaos to the types of apps that you can install to your Kubernetes cluster. Litmus has some great generic chaos experiments that you can run on your cluster. And so again, it gives you the peace of mind to know that when you're deploying your application to Kubernetes, that you're building in the types of resiliency that Kubernetes can provide you. The next one that I wanted to highlight in the configure stage is about moving our serverless category to viable. So serverless is a new application architecture paradigm that involves both serverless functions and applications. We have had this capability in our minimal maturity state for about 8 months now. And in 12.7, we're going to be moving it into viable. One of the big components of that is enabling you to set up a instance-wide domain. So as a GitLab administrator, you can set up an instance-wide domain that your users' individual serverless applications will automatically deploy to, so that they don't have to do a bunch of configuration and addition of domain names on their own, and also provide instance-wide serverless SSL certificates. So this is a great way to get started with enabling your individual developers to independently create serverless applications using GitLab. I'd like to move on to the monitor stage. So in monitor, our primary focus is actually on 2 key categories and moving them to what we consider viable. The first is logging. And so in logging, we're going to be adding the ability to not just search across aggregated logs, but also filter those logs and filter them in a view like I'm showing here on my screen, but also allow you to jump into a specific time slice of those logs using this filtering mechanism. Now that these feel like pretty minor, but it's a really key step for us in enabling what we consider one of the primary workflows for users of Monitor, which we call triage. So in our kind of initial inception of the triage workflow, you're reviewing a metric and you might get an alert on that metric. And so an issue has been created within GitLab's incident management tool. And then the key link here that is not provided today is the ability to look at a metric and kind of select a times period of that metric. Maybe it's when the alert spiked, and automatically drill down into the relevant logs, helping you get to understanding and triaging a problem with your application much more quickly. So I'm really excited about some of these initial steps, and we hope to get our minimal support for this triage workflow in the coming releases. The next big push in the monitor stage is around moving our error tracking to viable. And our error tracking involves a deep integration with the Sentry application. And in 12.7, we're going to be adding the ability to ignore. You can see here adding ignore and resolve buttons, both on the error list and error detail pages, as well as giving you a bunch more contextual information in the error detail page itself. So in this case, I'm showing you an error detail page that has the tags from Sentry. So that's things like the severity of the error, as well as the language that generated the error. Also, you'll notice this GitLab commit link and the GitLab issue link. Those are great contexts that allow you to stay in your one single application, and are another example of what Jason kind of highlighted, where we're making connections across stages and across different parts of the application that are only enabled by a tool like GitLab. The last one is actually in the stack trace. It's not displayed here, so I'm going to jump to a different screen where you can view the file for that stack trace. Now we're able to take you not just to look at the raw file, but actually take you to the git blame version of that file. So that will give you context around what specific lines have been changed in which commit by which developer. So imagine the power of being able to look at a stack trace while triaging an error and find the specific line and the specific developer who last adjusted that line and be able to contact them and pull them into the context of the issue. Those are the kinds of workflows that only GitLab can create by having this singular application for your whole DevOps lifecycle. So I'm really excited about the improvements that we're making to those who are asked to do, if you're asked to do production support for your application, making your life easier with some of these kind of deep integrations with other parts of GitLab. The last thing I want to highlight is not a feature, but I just want to call out, and I'm wearing my Santa hat, so I think it's appropriate, that yesterday we announced that we are going to be moving what we call our 3 pillars of observability, so metrics, logging, and tracing, to our core product. These have been in our page tiers, but part of GitLab's kind of annual process is to provide a gift to our community by open sourcing some key components. And I'm really excited, as someone who's passionate about democratizing operations for everyone, about moving this specific set of functionality to not just enable developers of our open source tool to use them, but also encourage contribution so that we can kind of more rapidly improve this experience for anyone who's asked to observe and configure and respond to applications in production. So happy holidays. With that, I will pass it back over to you, Scott. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenny. Nice job, Santa. Okay, let's move to David DeSanto, who's going to cover secure and defend.
Thank you, Scott. And again, happy holidays to everybody who's watching the live stream. To kind of kick us off here, we're going to dive into the secure stage. I'll let you know up front that these are a little bit later than we usually talk about. Again, due to the holidays, we have a bunch of people taking some time to spend with their family, which I think is really good. To start off with stack analysis, I want to highlight something that's been a long-term goal, supporting air-gapped or fully offline environments. And during our testing in the last several weeks, we've been able to identify SaaS should be able to do that for on-prem in the next release. So we'll be documenting what configuration changes you need to make to be able to run SaaS in that air-gapped environment. On the dynamic analysis side, we're also looking at expanding what you can see within the different components. The first to highlight for you is showing the list of resources scanned by DAST. Now, when you're looking at it, you can see this within the merge request itself. Down here at the end, you can see here's the DAST results, and now it's listing how many URLs were scanned, and you can click on View Details. And what that's going to do is take you to that part of the results. You can see the individual URLs to make sure your application is getting fully tested. You can also see that in the pipeline view as well. So again, here at the bottom, you have the list of URLs and the ability to hit View Details and be taken to those results. Finally, for the secure side, for composition analysis, there's 2 things that we're focused on. First is supporting Go dependency scanning, which is a nice big step forward for composition analysis, as well as exposing the license compliance components off the tabbing on the left-hand side of the UI. When we start talking about defend, last time we talked about some things that were being worked on for long-term planning, and those are bringing our intrusion prevention and our container network security into place. So we look at what we have here for 12.7. Those 2 items that we talked about as stretch goals are there listed, and they're on track to be part of the 12.7 release. And the final item is focused on the policies that will be applied to both of those new features. Finally, within the runtime application security, we're exposing WAF statistics. This is helping us bring it from minimal to viable. To kind of show you what that looks like, our goal is to be able to begin generating stats that will help you decide, is the WAF working the way you want it to work, and what are areas you need to address. And this is our step on the path to getting to what Kenny showed you during the ops section, being able to pull our logs from the WAF into that view that he showed related to pods, which, by the way, I think is a really cool option that we're working on for everybody. What this would look like in the 12.7, we're adding a new subtab here off security and compliance. It says threat monitoring. And then within the UI, you can actually see the stats that are happening. So this example, it's in a block mode, and you can see that about 11% of the attacks, or 11% of the traffic blocked was tagged as attacks. I also like the fact you can see the total amount of traffic going through, able to drill down in that in more detail, whether that's shorter time, 30 days, or longer. So that's it on the side for the security. For secure and defend, I'll hand it back to Scott.
Thank you, David. And last but not least, Josh will cover enablement.
Thanks, Scott. So for enablement, we have a few really key important themes that we're working on this release and some really exciting features within those. So the first theme we're working on is improving the performance of the GitLab server. And we're doing that in a couple different ways. The first way is we're working to establish Postgres 11 as the minimum required version in 13.0. This will allow us to take advantage of all the new features and functions in PG 11. Right now, we're kind of using 9.6 as the baseline. And there's just a bunch of improvements we can't realize without doing something like multiple code paths, which we're trying to avoid. And so we're setting a new floor here in PG 11. And one of the key improvements here we can take advantage of is partitioning. And that will allow us to increase the scalability of GitLab, as well as also improve performance of some queries. And so that's really exciting for us. Another key area that we're working on to improve the overall performance of the GitLab server is switching from Unicorn to Puma. We've been working on this for a while. We're getting close to the end here, so the finish line. And we've been deploying Puma running on GitLab.com for a while, picking up learnings for that. We'll continue to roll out across more of the fleet within this milestone. And then we're working on also making sure we catch and think through all the potential edge cases with Puma around things like rugged before we go ahead and make this on by default for our customers in Omnibus. So that's also really exciting. And then last on performance, but certainly not least, we're also continuing to improve our API performance. A key area we're working on is the project API. We're working on shifting from offset-based pagination to key set-based pagination, because as you can see here, as you kind of call for deeper and deeper pages or deeper offsets, the performance on the offset-based pagination significantly declines. Whereas with key set pagination, it's a constant time operation. So this will improve the performance for both the API clients, people who are trying to actually get data back out, they'll see faster results. And furthermore, we'll also have a decreased load in the GitLab server. So it's a win-win for everyone and really exciting. Moving on from the performance theme, we're also looking to make it essentially allow our customers to have a quicker time to value. And we're working on doing that by making it easier to deploy and install GitLab to one of our reference architectures. And one of the key ways we're doing this is working on producting some of our Terraform scripts they have within GitLab. So right now we've been working on improving the GitLab provisioners that we have within distribution, and we're working to enable Geo. We almost finished it last release. We'll continue to get it across the line this release, and that will allow us to have a deployment of HA of GitLab with Geo on GCP for this end of this release. And we'll use that also for internal testing to make sure that we can actually ensure that we don't have any regressions potentially across all these things that we're moving between Geo and distribution and database upgrades and things like that. We had a couple bugs in the last few releases that we're looking to not repeat and make sure we can prevent. We're also looking to improve our Helm chart as well. As you can see, a number of improvements here around things like Kubernetes 1.16, getting ready for Helm.3, also some of our dependency updates. And then the last thing we want to work on here is improving disaster recovery. And so you can see we're actually working to improve in particular the documentation and understanding we have of the current failover process. So we have a bunch of investigation we're doing here to make sure we have a deep understanding of how this can be done today and where the gaps are, sort of a baseline, if you will. And we then also have some further work we're doing to actually improve the situation around things like easy to pause and resume. And then finally, we're also driving forward here on getting Geo enabled for DR and .com. And you can see we have a number of kind of threads we've got going on here in this release around improving the deployment we have running on staging, and then also continuing to prepare for the dr.gitlab.com site, which would be our production DR site for .com. So a lot of great progress there in some key areas, a bunch of other areas we're working on as well. So click through the issues. But thanks everyone, and back to Scott.
Thanks, Joss. Great progress on a bunch of fronts. I want to thank all the presenters for running through this. Also thank the hundreds of people who are working with them to deliver all this value. Sure looking like the best release ever to me. Before we depart, I would ask that I'm going to go back to the page. So about.gitlab.com/direction/kickoff. If you look here in the sentence, it says provide feedback. There's a link there to a survey. We would very much love to get feedback on how this meeting works for you and whether you're getting the maximum amount of value out of this half an hour. So if you could take a minute to fill that out, we'll learn from it and continue to iterate. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining in. Happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2020. Thanks.